What's up, Emerge? This is Minister Zach coming to you live from the Spring. Super excited because we're in this Bible study and we're studying the book of Ezra. I love this book. I'm so ready. I'm hyped for this Bible study. Hey, we're in this series called Preparing for the New Normal. Preparing for the New Normal. And this is so exciting. When Pastor Taylor shared the vision with me about it, it just sparked my interest. And so I've been in Ezra. I've been studying Ezra. I'm super excited about what we're doing. And so Ezra is interesting, but before we even get to Ezra, I want to explain the vision of why we're even doing this. Because we're obviously headed into abnormal seasons in our lives. The church world is changing around us, so how we live our lives is changing. How we go around in public is changing. I don't have all the answers, but I know that the answers will have to change. And it will be something we as teenagers have to and must adapt to. Have to and must adapt to. I want you to understand that word adapt. Adapt. What does adapt even mean? Because this is our word for the day. Adapt literally means to make something suitable for a new use or purpose, or modify, become adjusted to new conditions. And if we're being honest, adapting to a new normal is not the most fun idea in the world. I remember when my mom was headed back to work and she was having to do all this protocol and she was wearing all this stuff and she had all these masks and she had to put on a suit. It was just all of this stuff because we're headed into new normal. And as she was headed back to work, as she was going back to work, she was dreading the day she had to go back because it was so much newness to her job that people just simply aren't used to. And so when she came back home, her back was hurting. She was just hurting because she was getting back into something that she wasn't used to. And she was headed into work, into a job that was uncomfortable because she's so used to just, doing what she normally does, that when she's invited or headed into this new normal, it makes you uncomfortable. And that's not just my mom, but it's all of us as Christians looking at the church world. The church world is obviously changing, so we have to adapt. We have to adapt because when we don't adapt, we're doing the opposite of adapt, which is to preserve. And preserve means this. Maintain something in its original or existing state. The reason why we miss key blessings and the things God has promised for us is because we're trying to hold on to something that God is trying to release us from. The reason why it's so hard to move into the future is because God will do it. The reason why it's so hard to move into our future is because God is over our past and we're still clinging on to the things in the past. So it makes it rough and tough for us to head into our future. And so we miss what God is trying to give us anyways because of the stubbornness that we have when it comes to adapting versus preserving. And when you preserve something, you keep it in its original state. And that's what I fear for us as teenagers, especially here at Springdale, is that we'll be so used to the past and how we used to do things, and we won't adapt and try to head into this new normal. I need us to hop on the new normal train. I know it doesn't seem so fun. It doesn't seem so cool, but I promise you, when we head into this new normal, God will release blessings over our lives. And when we head into this new normal, God will begin to show you your purpose and your destiny. He'll begin to implant visions in you, but what you must do is stop clinging onto the past and head into your future. This is what I'm trying to get us to understand, that we have to adapt into the changing world. We have to adapt into how we do ministry. We have to adapt to how we behave as kids and teenagers in the youth ministry at Springdale. Because if we don't adapt and we preserve and we hang on to the old instead of going into the new, we will miss what God is giving us because His blessings are in the newness and the past just has nothing. And so that's why you've been clinging onto the past and you feel like God's not blessing you in past seasons, but it's because God's trying to push you in a new season, but He can't push you in the new season if you're just so stuck on the past season. And that's what I believe that He's doing for our lives, trying to push us into this new season of our lives. I'll give you an example. When Moses hit the rock in the Bible, the children of Israel, they were wandering. They needed water. They were whining that God give us water. So the first time God said to Moses, hit the rock. And that was symbolism. And I'm not going to get into all of it, but it was a symbolism for something in the New Testament. But God told him, hit the rock. And so Moses hit the rock and water came out. The second time, God said to and the people were whining and complaining. God said to Moses, speak to the rock. But instead of speaking, because Moses was angry and frustrated, hit the rock again. And even though the children of Israel survived, God did not let Moses go into the promised land. And Moses missed the blessings of God of the promised land because Moses was stuck hanging on to something in the past. I'll give you another example. Abraham in the Bible, God told him he was going to have a son. And instead of believing God for the son and adapting to the fact and having his mindset that he was going to be an old man and have a child, instead of adapting to the fact that God was going to give him a son, he decided to have sex with someone else and have another son before God gave him his promise. And because of that, now the nations of both of the nations that descend from both of those sons are now in war to this day because Abraham decided not to adapt, but to preserve. He decided to preserve his mindset. He decided to cling onto an original thought that it is impossible for someone at my age to give birth. It is impossible for me and my wife to have a kid because we're so old. He decided to stick to his mindset. He decided to stick to what he thought was right instead of walking into the new season that God was trying to give him. And I feel like this will be some of us teenagers that we're stuck in the past instead of moving to the future. And if we move to the future and we don't cling to the past, that's when God will give us our blessings. So the question is, why are we studying Ezra? We're studying Ezra because if the children of Israel were to stay in the original or existing state and preserve instead of adapt, they would have missed the land that was promised to them. And let's be honest, this is the state of the church. Everything that's happening may not be a setback, but a comeback. But if we've already put the idea that change is bad and the new normal is a waste of time in our heads, our church may never grow or reach the place that God is trying to put us. This is the entire theme of Ezra. Ezra relates how God's chosen people were restored and from Babylonian exile to the covenant land as a people under God's rule. And I love Ezra. I don't have to get into all the historical meaning behind Ezra. If you understand this, you understand that Joshua it was Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicle, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. Those books are the historical books of the Bible. They're filled with history, and it has a whole lot of stuff that we can learn from these people. And so in the beginning of the history books, it was the people, they were in the promised land, but then they moved into exile. So at the end of the historical section of the books, they are now being released back into the promised land. And this is where we find Ezra. And this is why we're in this Bible study. It's because God is trying to release us. God is trying to allow us to enter into the promised land. But we're so stuck on the past and we're so comfortable with where we're at, we can't move into the promised land. I'm not trying to preach. I'm still trying to teach. I'm not trying to preach. But I'm telling you that in this Bible study and what God is trying to do in our lives, even if we're in the middle of a pandemic, even if we're in the middle of painful situations, God is trying to teach us and tell us to be like these people in Ezra. You have to understand, in Ezra chapter 1 through 4, I want you to read it. In Ezra chapter 1 through 4, Cyrus the king says to them, hey, y'all are free to go. And it says in verse 4 that some people won't want to leave. Please don't be that some people. Don't be the people who are stuck on the past. Just I dare you to let go of it and move into your future. And this was the lesson that I wanted us to know through Ezra. I'm super excited about this Bible study coming up because it won't just be me talking anymore. We're going to have different things happening. But I'm super excited because we will help, because a lot of us haven't even read Ezra, but I want to make it so practical to us as young people. But I dare you, this was my intro, and I dare you to let go of your past and move into your future. Hey, I love you. This is Minister Zach coming to you live from the Spring. Please remember to prepare for your new normal.